when you say feel, I want to dig into this. What do you mean by feel your dad? Is it like a signature of like a smell? Like I remember my grandmother's smell, the smell of her house. I could smell them. I remember the smell of my grandfather and his energy. I could feel their energies. And as I'm saying them in my head, I can feel the signature of both of them. Is that what you're talking about? Kind of like a signature of him?
Well, there were different ways that would show up. But in those earliest moments, it was like a pressure change in the air around me is the best way I could describe it. Yes. Okay. No, it kind of felt physical, but not in a way that it's something we could see, right? But I felt like a pressure change in the air around me. A lot of times my ear would ring. It took me about 2 months to pick up on this pattern for my brain to become aware of it, but the left side of my face would itch whenever I had this thought that his presence was near. And that's kind of how it started in the very beginning. And I just thought, he's here, but I wanted to know he was here. I need physical proof that he's here. But of course, our loved ones from beyond can't manifest themselves exactly in front of us. So it shows up in the signs. It shows up in the synchronicities. It shows up in all of those ways. And a lot of times, there was a moment where I had that felt presence, and I was on a walk and I closed my eyes and I said, Dad, I really feel you, but I could really use a deer about now because I wanted the proof. Mm-hmm. And as I picked up my head to continue on my walk, there was a buck right in my direct walking path, 40 feet away, just staring at me. And I'd have those types of moments that to me were the confirmation that this is real. I'm really feeling him. And so every time I believed, once I finally believed, then something new would open.
Interesting. So
and it's like him dangling a carrot. Now, we know Amber, she's curious. She's going to want to understand how these things are unfolding and how it's working. And so let's just keep dangling carrots in front of her. And we'll guide her down this path, knowing, but I didn't know, eventually that would develop into spontaneous mediumship abilities.
So let's get into the spontaneous mediumship. Because this story is fantastic. There's bucks, there's labs. It's fantastic. It's beautiful. I itch my face. I'm ringing in the ears. All that's great. Now, the leap from the connection to your father, which many people do have that. And I've heard of I've spoken to many people who've have a deep connection with someone, a son, a daughter, a parent, something like that. But to make the leap to evidential medium, what's that process like? And how did you deal with it? And I always like to ask the question, do you see dead people? How does it work for you? Is it the sixth sense? Like, how does it work exactly?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll explain how it works, but let's get to let's kind of go through the how did it develop. Briefly, I will say that once I believed I had this connection with my dad, I started a meditation journey.
And you had never meditated before? I
had, but sporadically around the age of 30 as a part of that seeking.
Yeah, with the Buddhist.
Didn't yes.
Yeah, it's with the Buddhist, yes.
But I didn't, there was no actual seriousness in my practice to it. But I started a meditation journey because I felt it key to understanding this connection. That meditation journey deepened my connection with my dad, where his voice returned, and it was like having almost a one-on-one conversation with him. So in some ways, that's the beginning of the mediumship journey, but it was just my dad. I didn't perceive it as mediumship. I perceived it as a connection with my dad, which we call after death or direct post-death communication is what we call that.
Did you even understand what a medium was? Did you know the topic of a medium?
I knew of mediums. Did I believe in them? I don't know. Mediums, I kind of thought, okay, there's probably some people that have some kind of ability, but I didn't spend a lot of my time thinking about it either. But as that communication with my dad developed, again, sometimes he would tell me things that were very direct and true. So it was validating for me that I really am hearing from him. And that eventually grew into spontaneous communication with others, with loved ones in my sphere. Not because I was asking, it was the next step. Again, every time I finally believed this is really happening, the next thing would grow. What I love about this, and I say it all the time, when all of this was first happening, I kept asking, what is the science that is fostering this? Because I love science and I believe in science, but I don't think some person sprinkled magic fairy dust on Amber. There is something in our universe that is fostering this, and I want to understand it.
Sure.
I still believe that, and I believe we are on the cusp of that understanding. But I also know I was being guided by love in something that is beyond science. And there's more than just that. But those mediumship abilities developed spontaneously through others. I can remember pulling in the driveway of my daycare provider, and all of a sudden I hear this young teenage male voice in my mind. And he said, in reference to my daycare provider, "She's great, isn't she?" And that is, I knew my daycare provider had lost her brother when he was a teenager. Decades before I ever knew her, didn't live in the same city, none of that. And I had a knowing, this is her brother. I just had a knowing. And so I sat in my car before I walked in her house to drop off my son. And I said, give me a piece of evidence. How can I know this is really you? And he showed me a bunny with a top hat on. And I thought, well, that's like the most random thing.
It's pretty specific.
Yeah, it's very specific, but also very random. And so I dropped my son off, and I just felt I couldn't tell her because it was so embarrassing and vulnerable. And what if that's false and I'm just crazy, But I did get up the courage to call her on the phone later. And I just said, I've been having these really interesting experiences since my dad died. And I heard this young male teenage voice in my mind in my car. I told her what he said. And I told her about the bunny with the top hat. And she said, he gave me for the very last gift before he died, a stuffed animal bunny with this big top hat on.
That you would have never known.
No, I would have never known that. And she said, I actually used to say to my mom, like after he passed, oh, he didn't really buy me that. Like, you must have bought me that. Because it's so random for this teenage boy to give his sister this, thing. But she held on to it with such sentimental value. She also said to me, I'm turning 50 next week and I've been asking him for a sign. And it was moments like that where it's not that I called myself a medium. I didn't even really attribute it to mediumship. I just knew that these fascinating moments of beauty and love were happening. Mm-hmm. And so they would happen like that, just in my sphere with people around me. And then they started happening in random public places. I remember being in a grocery store and being in line, just checking out my groceries, going about my everyday life. And all of a sudden I felt a woman, and I knew she passed in her 50s, and I knew she died of emphysema. I could feel it in my chest in almost a physical way. Mm-hmm. And I had a knowing, this is the mother of the woman behind me.
Wow, that's trippy, man.
Right. And so trippy. But, I have care and integrity and love and boundaries, and I'm not a person who's going to go around, hey, I'm hearing from I don't want to do that.
That's an awkward conversation.
No, but I think they needed to happen because I wouldn't have kept following the path if those things wouldn't have happened. I wasn't asking for any of this. Mm-hmm. And so I turned to that woman and I said, I'm sorry, I have to ask you something. Do you have a mother who passed in her 50s of emphysema? And she said, do you know my mother? And we both just kind of looked at each other with these kind of jaws dropped, and her with curiosity. And I just explained to her, I don't know what's happening. I just know that my dad died recently and I've been experiencing these types of things. And I'm trying to understand it. I didn't have a message with it. I just was feeling this presence. And it was a part of my journey of growth and understanding. But I did have a day when I became a medium.
Okay. And what was that day?
my dad's would have been his 76th birthday. We drove up to my childhood home to spread his ashes on the property behind the house. It's like 8 hours away. I don't ever go there anymore. It's very far. And my family made a whole trip of it. He always wanted some of his ashes, at least, on that property where he'd walk my dog every day. And so we drove up there. And the man that lives in the house now happened to be outside. So I told him why I was there. We had some small talk, exchanged some conversation. He was living in my dad's dream home. They built a log home, and we talked about that. And he made this comment about how, the house is pretty big for him. He's alone now. And I could tell he just had a very sort of sad, down feel about him. But I thanked him. He was happy to help me out with that tradition. So we did that. And when I went back to the hotel, and like I was now at this time, I was having a daily meditation practice. And I sat for myself in my meditation. And all of a sudden, I felt this man in my awareness. I felt him to have diabetes in life because I could feel in my actual stomach like little injection pinpricks. So I knew he gave himself daily injections in life, and I feel that he had diabetes. He showed me a writing pad, and I had the knowing he was a teacher. And then it came with the sense of, this is the brother of the man in the log home. And then right as I had that thought, a woman steps into my awareness, and I know she's a mother. She's holding flowers in my face, and she gives me the impression of she loved her mailbox flowers and her daily walks to the mailbox. And I just had the knowing, it's the mother of this man in the house. And then the mother showed me a kitchen potholder. I still have a picture of it. White and green with a yellow flower in the middle. And I knew it was passed down in the family. That part was just a knowing. And I'm quickly grabbing my hotel writing pad, and I'm writing all of this down on a piece of paper.
To watch the full video, click on the link below. And don't forget to subscribe.